You're listening to the Scaling Culture podcast, where we sit down with thought leaders who share their experiences building incredible workplace cultures. Our guest today is Bryan Adams, the author of the best-selling book, Give and Get Employer Branding, and CEO and founder of Ph.Creative, a global employer branding agency. With his team at Ph.Creative, Bryan has built world-class employer brands and talent engagement strategies for companies like Apple, Entain, and American Airlines. In this episode of Scaling Culture, Ron and Bryan discuss the Great Resignation and employer branding, job ads, and a psychological profile formula with 5 key elements, the EVP or employer value proposition, and effective screening tactics for interviews, and future trends and challenges when it comes to attracting and retaining top talent. And before diving into today's episode, be sure to subscribe and rate the podcast, and don't forget to check out our Scaling Culture Masterclass. This was created for all leaders trying to build and sustain high-performing culture. The series covers almost critical topics from building relationships to change management and operating as a team. To watch the trailer, head over to scalingculture.org. Now, onto the show.
Welcome to another episode of the Scaling Culture podcast. I'm your host, Ron Lovett, and today, all the way from San Diego, we have Bryan Adams, who's the CEO of Ph.Creative and the author of Give to Get. Bryan, welcome.
Ron, great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Really excited. I was just saying before we started, I haven't got a chance to read your book yet. I love the theme of the book. It's just taken a little long to get to me for some reason, probably because we have 9 feet of snow down here. And so maybe Amazon's a little slow when it comes to delivering through the treacherous Canadian snowbanks, right? But let's get into it. Before we talk about the book, look, we've introduced you already, but what drove you to write about this topic, right? This is company culture. You're talking about, attracting and keeping, the right individuals. What was your aha moment to even send you down this path? What's the pivotal moment that said, look, I need to kind of head in this direction?
So it was a fork in the road, actually, Ron, because what was fast becoming secret sauce for my agency was also becoming a real sense of frustration watching the industry lift and shift something from the marketing department that doesn't quite work in employer branding. You can only hire one person per role rather than sell as many things as you can to your entire audience. So the ethos didn't quite translate. And essentially, and still 81% of an employer brand leaders measure success of employer brand by an increase in volume of applicants. And I've never met a TA leader who just wants more volume of applicants. You want more of the right applicants. So Give and Get is really giving away our agency secret sauce that's worked for years with many global brands, such that it's there to repel more people than it is to compel. Because as soon as you're comfortable and confident with the fact that your organization isn't for everybody, we can now set about trying to find the people that it is for, and that is using employer brand more as a smart filter than a magnet to attract.
It's interesting. So one, I'm just curious, because marketing firms typically hadn't been used to attract employees. They had been used to push out the brand and attract customers. But are you seeing more of that? It's like, oh my goodness, with the Great Resignation, everything going on, are marketing firms starting to get involved more with, the people strategy and attracting the right people?
I'm a recovering marketer myself. PH.
I like that. I like recovering marketer. That means you had a rough ride.
So PH started out as a generalist marketing agency, but we slowly started to specialize, and until about 8 to 10 years ago, we became full specialist employer brand for a number of reasons. Mostly because marketing directors wouldn't return our call, but we saw a real opportunity to make a dent. There are a lot more marketing companies entering our space now, and we put the book out because we wanted to make a dent in the industry and influence how it was being done. We've got a blueprint that really works, and our vision is everyone loves their job. So the right thing to do is put out our philosophy and ethos and have more people embrace it. And that's what's happening.
It's funny when I look at your subtitle, Repel the Many and Compel the Few with Impact, Purpose, and Belonging. So, and I think you would agree, every company has a culture, right? Whether it's by default or design, whether you and I think it's good or bad, they have a company culture. So my question is, because when you look at the beginning, so repel many and compel the few, do you screen? I'm curious. Does your company screen a business to make sure that they're making the impact, have purpose and belonging, and that's your client base or not? It's like, look, Ron, you're still a command and control leader who wants to clock everyone's bathroom breaks. But then there's going to be people who actually want to work in that environment. That's okay or not. Or is it no? You have to check these boxes that you are making impact, and that's our customer base.
No, I mean, like you said, every organization has a culture. Every organization will be offering a certain amount of impact, a certain amount of sense of purpose, a certain amount of sense of belonging. It's our job to uncover where, what, and how, and help you articulate exactly how it feels and what direction it's pointed in. And then when we get to the give and get, it's not just talking about the strengths, benefits, and opportunities you have to offer as an organization, but also lean into the demands and the expectations, talking about the vulnerabilities, the work unfinished, the harsh realities that somebody is going to find on day one that they wish they knew before they applied. Because that's the stuff that candidates want to know. And it's also the stuff that employees want to be recognized for as well.
Yeah, because it feels like, so I just want to go back to this command and control environment for a moment, which there's plenty out there. So let's say a company today they are that company. They're rigid. They don't have a defined purpose. They don't have a defined value. They are going to work you like a dog, and you have no autonomy. You don't make decisions. You need to, there's heavy policy and procedure. Like, as I say this, I'm like, oh my God, I would never want to work there. But the reality is, there's probably, if you're that company, should you put that front and center? Hey, if you come here, we want you to work very hard. You don't worry, you'll never make a mistake because we have to approve everything. Like, should people lean into that as well? Or because I think there is this, I'm seeing lots of companies that haven't figured out the backyard or the foundation of their culture. They don't have their values set out. They don't have a purpose. And then they go to market and they kind of say, oh yeah, we've got this great culture. People land, they're like, whoa, this is not what was in the marketing material. So should people just lean into what they are, or should they stop, create a really fun, exciting culture and then try?
So it's interesting because every time we do an employer brand project, we start with research. We need to understand, okay, what is perception versus reality, and so on and so forth. But we also recognize that employer brand is 99% alignment with the organization. And we always reach crossroads in the research where an organization has to choose, okay, this is the reality that we found. Is this the reality that we want to keep, or are we going to make some decisions to change? And what is conducive to grow the organization? And when the leadership is clear and we have absolute clarity on how to move forward, then we know what to lean into and what to discard, what to dial up. But then we look for, okay, so if these things exist, the good, the bad, and the ugly, why do people stay? What is so compelling about this organization that makes people put up with that stuff and still find? Exactly. I mean, over the years, Amazon's had a bad rap for not being the most cuddly culture in the world. However, if you can work there for 2 years and you can get promoted and thrive, then you're probably a lot more employable at the end of it. And you've probably been paid well, and you can get a job somewhere else and springboard your career. Now, that's because they're known as a career catalyst and they own their culture. And it's not for everybody, but we've never found, and I believe there isn't good and bad culture. There just is what it is. Right. And for if there's 1,000 people that hate it, there's probably a handful of people who love it, and they know exactly why. And our job is to uncover that, dial it up, own it, and take it to market.
So what's some of the key questions? Like what is the telltale sign that people love it? And so this came up the other day. on one of the podcasts, and maybe I was on a podcast, I can't remember. And they said, what is the question that leaders should be asking today during these times of great resignation? And the question I came up with was asking your employees, knowing what you know about our company, would you be excited to reapply for the job today? And to me, that may answer one of these questions is, would I want to stay? What other questions are you using that are helping filter out like, oh yeah, this is the goods, right? Or you're in trouble?
So I don't know whether this fully answers your question, but I can tell you my favorite question. It's where we typically start. If it was your job to dissuade people to join your organization and you couldn't lie, what would you say?
Oh, great question.
And what that starts to do is uncover, okay, what do I really need to know about this organization? What are the harsh realities and the challenges and the adversities I'm going to find? Because once you are really clear on that, you can then say, okay, so why do you put up with that? What makes you stay? And the difference between why did you join and why did you stay are often very different. And what we're doing here is, that's not the we haven't struck gold there, but we've found the X marks the spot on the map of where to dig. Because if we can then start to find passion and pride and those sources of achievement, we're starting to get closer to the heartbeat of the organization, and we know what it takes to thrive. And we can start looking at the two types of capability, which I call brilliance and resilience. So the offense and defense aspects, so you might thrive if you're a problem solver and you're curious and you're great at X, Y, and Z. But actually, if you can't put up with these things over here, then you're going to emotionally drain and burn out, and you're not going to make it through. So getting to the sources of those things can be incredibly powerful. And if you find them across the organization, even in all different functions, then that's a common thread that you need to hold on to because it's part of the fabric of the culture of your company.
Yeah, interesting. And so once you have that narrative, from your perspective, how should companies put it out there? What's it look like? Where is it? What is there a format, a best practice of, okay, here's the key things that people love about working here? Because and by the way, I'm making an assumption, maybe I'm wrong. You're going to take that and now it's time to market and find new individuals that are compelled to this message.
Yeah. So the term best practice makes me nervous, but I can tell you what we do and what works. For me, there's 3 layers of employer brand strategy. The first is reputation, and the marketplace is still littered with a goal of becoming the best or the most attractive. And actually, it's not very useful to the organization. It certainly isn't useful to a candidate market. So we've recognized 3 types of reputation as an employer. The first is career catalyst. Are you a place to go to accelerate your career faster than anywhere else? Second is culture, which organizations of employer brand has traded on for many years. But, is this a place where I can bring my whole self to work and get a sense of belonging? And the third, now that millennials are officially running the world, is becoming the most priority, actually, is this idea of citizenship. Is this an organization that's going to leave the world in a better place than they found it? So once you have an idea of what reputation as an employer will serve the organization best and is most authentic, then you can, and that's the what and the why. You can then start to look at the how, which is the EVP, the employee value proposition. And if you can articulate what you have to give as well as what you stand to get, then everything's clear, it's strategic, and it's aligned with the company. It's aligned with the organization, which is the most important thing. And then the final layer is simply experience. So reputation is there to get attention. Proposition is there to get affinity. Experience is there to create affection. And if you know the reputation, you know the proposition, now you know where to place your bets on the talent experience line, candidate engagement, candidate, employee, or alumni, as to how to prove your reputation and validate your EVP. So they're the 3 layers that drive our successful projects. And if you think about it, it just makes super simple sense. And it aligns with the organization as well as satisfying employees and candidates alike with the truth. Isn't that a great concept?
It's funny. I just had this wonderful idea that I want to throw by you.
Yeah.
So I had brought up while we're talking a job description. Okay, a go-to-market.
Mm-hmm.
I want to run you through our key headlines. I want you to tell me, look, you're either on track or you're not, and that might be difficult, but just at a high level.
Sure.
But I do want to go back to one point. I want to go through this, but I do want to go back to EVP. We're hearing this more and more, and I would argue that some of you listeners don't exactly know what that is. It can be confusing. So make sure I'm going to circle that. We must go back to EVP.
Okay.
So I'm going to walk you through, and then I'm going to tell you an idea that I just had. So we've got this, my company Vita, it provides workforce housing for Canadians across Canada. So from Winnipeg to East Coast. And we've got roughly 2,000 units now, so apartments. And we were putting this role out. It was for a community creator role, we're buying some assets in Winnipeg, and it was going to be the first boot on the ground that helps us create the community, not just in the building, but in the broader sense. So we started off, I'm not going to read this, but about Vita. So just a quick, short description about Vita. And then we have a YouTube video so you can see more. And then we go from there to our commitments to you as the applicant. Here's what we're committing to you: a culture of learning, safe and compassion, feedback and coaching. Then we get into benefits, unlimited vacation, health and wellness allowance, the salary range, personal training, all those types of things. Then we talk about the role. So an overview of the role, the community creator, then the responsibility, and the key components to the role. And then the last section is about you, the candidate, and, can you do these things? And then that's it. So what do you think about that flow?
Well, I think you've certainly got everything in there, and it sounds fine. And typically, if somebody is interested, they will read everything as well. Right. The formula that we follow is quite simple, and it's empathy, curiosity, surprise, insight, and action. So if I circle back to that, empathy is designed to sort of win hearts and minds, and that might be about the purpose of the organization. And typically, you started with the company, which is absolutely spot on.
Because it's hard to be empathetic on like, hey, here's a job, right? So that makes sense. If you're going to press the empathy button, it's going to be about the, probably about the company and
context,
how it serves its customers. That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, this is where we might plug into the meaningful purpose of the organization, the inspirational vision. Then curiosity, something, that's going to pique somebody's interest, if you can, quickly followed by surprise, something they didn't know before. Because what we're doing is we're opening up both sides of the brain, and we're engaging people, and typically the surprise element might be about the team that you want people to join as well, because now they're leaning in and like, okay, tell me more about that. Once the both sides of the brain open, that's where you might fill it with the insight. Okay, so here's specifically what's on offer, and here's specifically what we want you to do. And at that point, somebody is most receptive to taking action, which is what you want them to do at the end. So that's the sort of psychological sort of profile of a good job ad. But I think the way you start with company, then team, and then job is right. So I think you got all the points in there. My one thing is, if you want the right person to lean in more, is tell them why it's difficult. Tell them, what to expect on the worst day, what type of capability and character they're going to need to get through some of the challenges, demands and expectations of the role, of the team, and of the company. It immediately becomes more authentic, but in a sort of reverse psychology way, it becomes more appealing,
more challenging.
Absolutely. And also, it's okay to be vulnerable and talk about what's left to be done. Tell half a story and invite somebody to come and complete that story, because it shows a sense of impact and where your contribution can matter as well. And organizations need to get over the fact that you've got to look your best, and you need to look the shiniest and the most complete. We can't out Google, and sometimes vulnerability or scrappiness, our perceived weaknesses, can actually be our strengths and the reason people apply. So that's what we're trying to bring to the marketplace and help people achieve.
Bryan, I was just about to challenge you. I was like, is that too soon to be that vulnerable and say, hey, here's a challenge we see in the role? But I think you're spot on, right? Because it does go with the subtitle of your book. It's repelling, and that's okay. This is this type of repelling. Oh my God, that's no good for me. Because I was thinking about this role in particular. If we had have added that, we would have said, this is a new role. This will evolve over time. We need your help to create the key performance indicators, which are not done yet. Like we would have put those things in here. And then I want to throw my idea for our listeners and for you. So, because there's a lot of, there is a lot of people, especially during this great resignation, where people have joined a company and said, you know what? Ph.Creative is not what you said it was, or Vita is not what you said it was. And so it was fake news. I'm out of here. And so what I was thinking, and I want to know if this is a good idea, because I'm going to do this starting, unless you say it's a horrible idea, unless you completely toast it, I'm doing this. That when we get through the company culture piece, what's in it for you? Or at the end of the ad, I want to say, sounds too good to be true. Call Andrew Dart. He's been working here for 8 months. He'll tell you. Get his opinion, call or text. Like, put your money where your mouth is, right? Like, what an interesting concept. What do you think? Too aggressive?
No, not at all. I love that idea. I think the phone number of the person you put probably needs a little bit of validation, and make sure that they're not inundated with calls. Make sure they're
Let's
happy
go email.
with it.
Let's go email. All right, that was too aggressive.
But it's interesting because if you can pre-handle somebody's objection, which is essentially what you're alluding to, if you can record 3 of your employees that are in the team of the job that you're advertising, and they are very open and honest about, hey, sometimes it's like this round here, and sometimes this can be challenging. So you have to be prepared to A, B, and C. However, when you do, the team rallies round. There's always a learning opportunity, the support from the management, and looking back in my short 18-month stint here, I've grown as a person because of X, Y, and Z. So what you've done there is you've injected like what it's like on its worst day, the capabilities and character you need to cope, never mind thrive and survive. But you've contexted it as like why people put up with that stuff and how people make sense of it and find a sense of purpose, impact, and belonging. So you're getting all of that ingredients in a human way. You're telling a very authentic story that people believe. And then best of all, it puts the candidate to an authentic decision.
And you visualize the journey, right? You visualize this journey. Yeah, I love that. That's very interesting.
Absolutely. So, you might think about putting some of those employee questions and answers directly into a job ad because that's compelling.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I love that through video, because I'm even looking at mine. I'm like, that would be long if we started to, FAQ'd this thing. But I love the concept. And I think I'm going to put, and sorry, Andrew, I'm going to put your contact in the next ad that, he's going to hate this episode. His phone is going to blow up, right? He'll be like, I like this job till Ron Lovett put my name in there. Exactly. Now I have no life. My phone rings 24/7. I'm leaving.
Oh,
so
great.
Let's go back to EVP. Now, I could be wrong. I feel like what we've been talking about is EVP, but can you break that down for those of what is EVP?
Yeah, so a lot of people interchange the terms employer brand or talent brand with EVP. So employer branding is looking at the reputation, the proposition, and the experience, as I outlined earlier. The employer brand is the sort of headline, the sort of the tagline, the essence that you're articulating that's closely aligned to a company vision. But the EVP, the employee value proposition, is essentially the what's in it for me, and the job is to set expectation. But if you look at the definition of proposition, it needs to be a two-way street, and this is rather than just set out the strengths, benefits, and opportunities to be found within the employee experience. This is where our give and get approach lives up to the word proposition by being very clear with the two-way value exchange. So that's all that is. So employer branding can be the what and the why. The EVP is the how. How does that show up? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And what are both sides of the equation here?
I was just going to say, the give, the get the two sides, that is back to what you're saying, being a little vulnerable about the toughest day, like showing this is not all rainbows and unicorns, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And so walk me through smarter filter. You talk about that. What is a smarter filter, and how does it get applied?
Yeah, so conventionally right now, employer branding and EVPs are used just to attract more people. And it's understandable because, the Great Resignation, a lot of companies are on fire. They've got, 10 times the open recs than they would have normally had. So the temptation is to just pull all the levers and to have more applications. But actually, if you think about it, there's a whole industry of technology designed to combat that. We're looking at AI and machine learning of how to filter things out and automate and all of this stuff, because we're stuck under a blizzard of applications that recruiters can't get to. And in a world where candidate experience is recognized as so important to protect the reputation of your organization and so on and so forth, surely more applications is not the way to go. And it isn't. We want more of the right applications. But if that can mean less volume overall, why wouldn't that be fantastic? Your TA leader and your recruiters would thank you endlessly for that. So the idea is it's a smart filter for both the organization to recognize what does an ideal candidate look like for this role quicker, but also for the candidate. The best candidate experience an organization can offer somebody is all the information not to apply in the first place, so they don't waste their own time and they don't waste the organization's time. So it's simply this: it's being authentic and transparent enough to make a candidate come to an educated decision whether to apply or not, based on whether they are a good match and whether they have what it takes to thrive.
It's interesting. I had a couple thoughts as you were speaking. One, for those who just can't get their head around or can't afford AI, right? So there's going to be a huge bucket of companies that like AI, forget it, I'm just not there. And I think there's arguments that AI is not there, and by the way, I'm not educated on it, but I go back to the story, which I heard, and I believe this to be true, was that Amazon, do you know the story about Amazon's AI and they applied it? So Amazon, the story I heard was Amazon put into play an AI filter, and they said, here's all the best candidates, run the AI through this, and that should filter us forward. So sure enough, within months, there were no female applicants getting through because the AI they probably had of the best candidates, it created bias right away. So maybe there was 90%. So AI just said, why would we ever talk to a female around here? And then they're like, they shut it down. That kind of scared me a little bit. So I think about what we do and what I think some neat customers do, which I think is in line with this. I want to talk about this strategy. One, we use question, score-based questions, which is not AI, but it certainly scores. But even better than that, back to, I think this is in line with repel or compel. Have you heard of the strategy of knockout questions or return ticket? And the first time I heard about this was Southwest Airlines. Sherry Perez was talking about, most companies have, can you legally work in the United States? That's a knockout question. You're gone if you can't. Do you have a driver's license? Knockout. Do you have a valid work permit? Knockout. 19 years of age or 21 to serve alcohol? Knockout. But they failed to add an operational question in the knockout. And Southwest Airlines, in this example, the knockout question for those who handled the baggage was, are you open to working overtime shifts? And that's a operational knockout question, because if you're not, you're knocked out because planes are late and you get forced into overtime. And we were discussing this at, this is a version of it, but at Vita, we have what's called a building ambassador. And we have 4 pillars: safety, security, cleanliness, and opportunity. And building ambassadors live in the buildings. It's like our superintendent. And our knockout question for them is actually a knockout. I don't know what we're going to call it. It's a knockout exploration, which is, we want to see if they keep a tidy home. We either want through Zoom or virtually, or to inspect and meet them at their home, because if they don't keep a tidy home, they are not aligned with the pillar. But we can't figure out how to get that in a question. So it's our version of a knockout. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something companies should be thinking about? Is that in line with compel or repel?
Well, I think it's really smart. I think you've hit on something really nailed. You're trying to come up with the ultimate question to find alignment, which we've talked about already, to each pillars, and whether that's each employer brand pillar or each value. I think that's absolutely super smart. And rather than rely on artificial intelligence, what we've been talking about for the last few minutes is just intelligence,
right?
And it can really take us quite a long way. And if you think about, okay, what are our other questions around the important capabilities that people need to demonstrate and evidence to have a shot at surviving, let alone thriving at our organization? It is a very smart place to start. Absolutely.
And does the book go into specific interview questions and how to filter for your values, or not? You've kind of left that aside.
So there's a couple of example questions in there, and from memory now, we do break down the job advertising formula. We look at story formula. We look at how to construct the proposition from both the give and get perspective. But yeah, there's a bit of sort of granular detail that isn't in there based on what you're talking about there. It's more. There are plenty of examples of how to craft and use an EVP. Yep. But it's aimed at the practitioner that needs to cultivate an employer brand, figure out their EVP, go to market with job descriptions.
And so it seems like this is a very important book to read and strategy to implement for in-house marketing teams too. Like, marketing now is not even in-house, because we talked about external marketing teams or companies helping for client acquisition and brand strategy. But is that something that internal marketing people now need to be turning their, not just the go-to-market, but the employee experience as well? Like, marketing's creative. It should start shifting there, correct?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's funny, we do an employer brand strategy sprint course, and we're seeing more marketers appear on that, it's like, okay, what is this all about? Because there is certainly a crossover. What we've found is the content you create for employer branding translates because consumers want to know that you're a good organization. People have stopped giving you consumer dollars if they don't believe in the ethics of an organization or how you treat people and so on and so forth. So telling stories of the people behind a brand can be super powerful. And in some cases, it can be more effective to drive customer revenue than just conventional marketing. It doesn't really translate the other way, so showing candidates marketing material doesn't really add value to whether they're going to make that career decision or not. So it's an interesting dynamic. But to answer your question more concisely, it's definitely something we're seeing marketers and company leaders in different areas of the organization start to get up to speed with, because it is adding value. And ultimately, people are the only competitive advantage left in business. Everything else can be commoditized and can be automated and can be bought and acquired. People are the only point of difference left. So employer brand is definitely rising in the priority list.
And it's funny that you say that, because I don't think enough CEOs, entrepreneurs, leaders of their teams even are thinking about that. I don't think they think about that this is your competitive advantage. And it's a different way of looking at it, because I always go back to sports and I say, look, I look at companies and business like sports. You have the best team, you win the game of business. Mm-hmm. You're saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But we've just gone through, a 20, 30 year period where technology and innovation of technology has been seen as the big differentiator. And now we're in a period of humanity where people are being appreciated and sort of seen as the difference maker. And even the technology and the innovation behind the technology takes people to build. We've reached a saturation point of technology where the only competitive advantage left is the marginal gains you get by having a world-class person or just a above average type of team. And this is what organizations in very competitive marketplaces have come to realize. They have to brand themselves and be compelling to efficiently and effectively find those people who are going to create the next innovation and drive their organization forward.
Right. Absolutely. And then, but it brings me full cycle back to that other point that, maybe I'm just kind of, projecting what I think about that, from my perspective, what is great company culture is, if you find those people, you better be able to deliver internally. Like, I still think there's a lot of reflection going on today, even though, yes, every company has its culture, but I just believe that a lot are not adding value to the individuals. We were talking about this at the dinner table last night. It went from the transaction of, Bryan, you work for me, I care about what you do at work, and I don't care what happens at home, to, I better care about Bryan and make Bryan a better person. And for that, Bryan, I'd like the best version of you here. Like, there is this shift, and some people are not bought into that yet.
Oh, 100%. We're seeing that with the Great Resignation. Employer branding isn't just to attract talent. It's not just to find talent. It's to remind talent of why they're there and why they should stay. And, the next big wave, and I've just talked about sort of the specialist talent creating all the innovation at the edges of organizations. But how about all the blue collar talent that Amazon are sweeping through city by city and hiring? It's going to be a challenge. The next big challenge for employer brand is how to get that middle body of employee base to come and work at your organization instead of these giants who can outpay and outmarket. That's the next challenge we're going to face.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Bryan, before we wrap, anything else that is in the book or that you're thinking about that's a key headline that we haven't discussed today?
So I don't think it's a key headline, but one message that I would love to put out there is, we work with global brands with complex talent audiences, but this isn't just big business stuff. This is for the startup with 2 or 3 people in a company, or you can't do this soon enough. It's much easier to identify and articulate the culture you want and scale than it is to scale something and change it once you have hundreds of people and so forth. And it can make the difference. And I think as entrepreneurs, we've all made that hire that nearly sunk us early on, and it's because we didn't know our culture, we didn't know what it took to thrive, and we didn't know our give, and we didn't know our get.
Well, it sounds like, on that note, we should be packaging our books up, because your book and my book, Scaling Culture, will go very well together. I think they will be combined for a great secret recipe of success.
There you go. I love a good 2 for 1. I love a good That's 2 for 1.
Well, Bryan, look, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I've got a ton of notes. So thank you for stopping by and running through your different strategies. It's been eye-opening for me, as I'm sure it has been for our listeners today. So thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Really enjoyed that.
For more information about Bryan and his work, please follow him on LinkedIn. To learn more or purchase the Scaling Culture Masterclass online course, please go to scalingculture.org. And if you're enjoying the Scaling Culture podcast, please subscribe and share. We'll be back soon with another incredible guest.